Here's the rest of my 50 favorite films. We're up to number 25. Jurassic Park. This is another one of those stories about what happens when science goes too far. It's like a prehistoric Frankenstein. I saw it in the theater when it came out, and it was one of those life-changing experiences. After this, I became obsessed with reading Michael Crichton novels. I got hyped for when Congo came out, and then realized some things should be left as books. But Jurassic Park was phenomenal. It was my generation's version of King Kong. The dinosaurs were more realistic and scarier than anything I'd ever seen. It used animatronics, and the CG was great because they only used it when they needed to, which was wise. I think that this was the biggest leap ahead in special effects as far as creatures go, because like here you have King Kong, which broke grounds, then you have Jurassic Park, which broke lots of new grounds, and then everything else has kind of just been, you know, just a little bit past Jurassic Park. It hasn't really jumped ahead that much. Number 24, The Seven Faces of Dr. Lowe. I think this is an underrated classic that could have been as beloved as Wizard of Oz or something like that, but just didn't catch on. It's about a quiet western town that's visited by a strange man named Dr. Lowe, who brings with him a magical circus full of odd characters like a serpent, the abominable snowman, Medusa, Merlin, the fortune teller, and the goofiest of all, Pan. Tony Randolph plays all these characters and does a fantastic job. This movie can be enjoyed for its individual scenes. There's a scene where the fortune teller is telling a woman her future, but he's honest and brutal. He brings her to tears. At the same time, it pains him because he's cursed to tell the truth. It's hilariously morbid. The whole film is a mixture of different emotions, but the feeling it leaves you with is a positive outlook that the whole world is full of magic and wonder. Number 23, The Great Escape. Inspired by real-life events, it tells the story of prisoners in World War II trying to escape from a Nazi prison camp. Their plan is to dig tunnels from inside their prisons and dispose of the dirt out on the camp. The movie works so well because you really want to see these guys get out, and it's not easy for them at all. Most movies allow the characters to overcome the obstacles and have happy outcomes, but this film just tells it like it is. It's unpredictable, and it makes you wonder who's going to escape, who's going to get caught, and who's going to die. The cast is excellent. Donald Pleasence, Charles Bronson, among many others, but the guy who steals the show, as always, is Steve McQueen. The motorcycle chase is one of the all-time greatest action scenes, not just for the stunt work, but because of the context of it, because you're so emotionally invested in seeing him get out. Number 22, North by Northwest. It's the ultimate reluctant hero story about an innocent man who's being chased all across the US by both the police who think he's a terrorist and actual terrorists who think he's a government agent. Hell-bent on finding the real agent, he goes on a quest as the plot unravels and gets even more complicated. He finds out the agent never existed, a decoy planted by the FBI, but now that he's assumed the role, he's enlisted to actually become the fake agent he was originally trying to prove he was not. It'll make your head explode. Cary Grant is phenomenal in the role, speaking rapidly, making smart comebacks to everything. You believe that a guy with his personality could get himself into such a mess. It's both a comedy and a suspenseful thriller, one of Alfred Hitchcock's best. One of. Number 21. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. You could say Raiders is better, which I think is great too, but I personally prefer The Last Crusade. The real ingenuity of the Indiana Jones films is that they're all built around cliches of old adventure films, but they come off as being so fresh. The quest for the Holy Grail has lasted centuries, and it's satisfying to see closure, even though it's just a movie. It's fun to speculate what the last crusade for the Grail would be like. In this case, there's an invisible walkway over a pit, an ancient guardian who's been sitting there since the medieval times, and a bunch of fake Grails that will turn you into a skeleton. The more far-fetched, the better. My favorite thing is the father and son relationship. Sean Connery is great as Indy's dad, and it's so appropriate because James Bond was one of the main heroes that inspired Indiana Jones. Number 20. Batman. One of the key factors in films being my favorites is that they need to improve as time goes on, and this is no exception. When I saw it as a kid, I was kind of put off by it. It was the first time we saw a darker side of Batman on the big screen. I thought it was weird and disturbing, but now I love it for how weird it is. It feels like a dark comic book come to life. You may prefer your Batman films to be more realistic, and that's cool too, but I prefer the unnatural vibe that it has. It's strong on atmosphere and visuals, even if it's weak on narrative structure. Danny Elfman holds it all together with one of the best musical scores ever. To me, that's the official Batman theme. Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson are a great matchup. I like how the villain is part of Batman's backstory, and he has to weigh justice over personal revenge. I like how the first time they meet, it's Bruce Wayne the child and Jack Napier the criminal. Then in the chemical plant, it's Batman against Jack Napier. Then it's Bruce Wayne against the Joker. And then finally, it's Batman against the Joker. So you get every combination. Oh, a little song, little dance, Batman's head on a lance. Tell me, what do you know about? Number 19. Night of the Living Dead. It's the last of the great classic black and white horror films. It introduced the flesh-eating version of zombies and created the bridge between old horror and new horror. Likewise, it was my own personal bridge after having seen all the classics. This was the film that toughened me up and got me ready to move on to Dawn of the Dead and all the other great gory stuff the genre has to offer. It was an inspiration to me because it's another film that shows you what you can do with a small budget. Every horror filmmaker somewhere has recreated a shot or two from Night of the Living Dead. Number 18. Sword in the Stone. It's my favorite of the Disney animated features. It happens to be the last one released while Walt Disney was still alive. It's an underdog story about a young boy named Arthur who gets bossed around by his foster father and brother, not realizing that he would become the future King Arthur. They underestimated the kid, and I love the message that individuals may have their own destiny and no one should ever sell themselves short. He befriends a wizard named Merlin and a talking owl named Archimedes. Merlin becomes Arthur's mentor and helps him rise up and become what he needs to be. I love how the characters play off one another. Merlin's trying to teach Arthur, but Archimedes keeps jumping in, criticizing the way he's teaching him, and Arthur is all ears no matter what. He's so innocent and pure. I don't know what it is, but this movie just brings a smile to my face. Number 17. Rear Window. Some more Hitchcock for you. Jimmy Stewart plays a photographer who's recovering from a broken leg. He's so bored, he spends a lot of time staring out his window and begins to suspect that one of his neighbors committed murder. He has an amazingly beautiful girlfriend played by Grace Kelly, who he disregards because he thinks she's too perfect for him. He's into adventure while she's into fashion, but they work together on solving the mystery and settle their differences. Nothing like a murder case to help a relationship. It's Hitchcock's subtle dark humor. Jimmy Stewart, who's in a lot of Hitchcock films, gives his usual awesome performance that's natural and full of nervous energy. You see everything through his eyes and feel like you're in his spot, spying on the neighbor. You get a sense of the whole neighborhood through that one window. It's brilliantly shot and edited, and nothing less than the work of a master.
Well, half of the things you eat, you can't even look at when they're alive.
Number 16. This is Spinal Tap. It's a story of a musically pretentious and unoriginal rock band. It's shot in the style of a documentary with a fictional director and a fictional band. It follows the rise and fall of their career. Their drummers keep dying, they're cursed with a dismal black album cover, they get lost on the way to the stage, their stage props go wrong, and eventually they're reduced to an opening act for a puppet show. I have to admit, it took me a few times to really get this movie. At first I thought it was a one-track joke and not consistently funny enough, but now I think it's one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Before this, I had never seen a fake documentary. It was a new thing to me, and this opened my mind to that possibility. It's one way to tell a story and helps the audience to make believe it's real, and when it came out, lots of people were legitimately fooled. Number 15. Jaws. I think everyone knows what it's about. A killer shark is terrorizing the beaches, so three men hit the waters to hunt it down. In essence, it's a remake of Creature from the Black Lagoon, a simple story about a monster on the loose, but it's done so well that it became a mainstream blockbuster. Roy Scheider, Richard Dreyfuss, and Robert Shaw are all excellent. You spend so much time with these three characters, you feel like you're on the boat with them. This is one of those movies I first saw with my dad, and maybe the fact that it's on a boat and my dad likes fishing, it's just something about it that makes it feel like a dad movie, or a 4th of July movie you watch after barbecuing. That's when it takes place, if I need to mention. I feel like this movie begs to be watched every summer. Number 14. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Gene Wilder is incredible as the Candyman, Willy Wonka, who makes the world taste good. The moral of the story seems to be about being a good kid and not being greedy, but damn, do these kids get punished. It's really dark, actually. The kids all get disposed of in different ways, and you never see them again. Wonka says they'll all be returned to their rotten selves, but I don't trust that smirk. And what was going to happen if Charlie and his grandpa got sliced up in the ceiling fan? Would the Oompa Loompas stitch them back together? For a movie about candy and chocolate, it's pretty horrifying. There's the tunnel scene where it actually shows a chicken getting its head cut off. But there's also cute songs, bright colors, a fantasy factory full of sweets, and in the end, it leaves you with a warm, optimistic feeling that if you look in the right places, the world is full of pure imagination. Having that feeling is a gift everyone deserves, and all you gotta do is watch this movie. Number 13. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. The last and best of the Dollars trilogy by Sergio Leone. Right off the bat, we have three great characters. Lee Van Cleef as the ruthless bounty hunter, Angel Eyes, Eli Wallach as the dirty, rotten, shit-talking scoundrel, Tuco, and Clint Eastwood as the calm and cool Blondie, also known as the Man with No Name. Blondie and Tuco hate each other's guts, but they need to work together to find a stash of gold that's buried in a cemetery grave. Tuco knows the name of the cemetery, and Blondie knows the name of the grave, but neither one of them's telling. Along the way, they have Angel Eyes watching over them, who also wants the gold. It all leads to a suspenseful finale with the three of them facing off. Reasons I love it so much? Well, first of all, the music by Ennio Morricone, and also the camera angles. It uses everything from the extreme close-ups to the epic wide shots. And most of all, what I love is the acting. Blondie is the closest you come to a good guy, but really they're all rotten swindlers. It shows us a savage world where only the quickest survive. Number 12. Vertigo. Hands down, the best Hitchcock film. Jimmy Stewart plays Scotty, a detective who suffers from acrophobia, fear of heights, something he eventually has to encounter again. He's on the trail of a woman who's following in the footsteps of her ancestor, as if the ghost of the past is controlling her. Scotty gets drawn into the story, just as we do as an audience. It slowly pulls us in. It just builds and builds and builds, and by the end of it, I feel overcome. I love how you witness Scotty mentally deteriorate as he tries to recreate his lost love. The Scotty you see at the start is completely different than the one at the end. It's a strange story. There's themes running through it about facing your fears and of hopeless nostalgics desperately clinging to the past. And those are themes I like to explore in my own work. So, is Vertigo an influence? Absolutely. Number 11. Ed Wood. As mentioned already, this movie introduced me to Ed Wood, a guy who didn't have it easy but still made films anyway. He never gave up. Johnny Depp is fantastic as Ed Wood, and this was probably the first movie I saw him in before he got super famous. Martin Landau plays Bela Lugosi, and he's so good it's like Lugosi came back from the grave. It may not be the most historically accurate film. Tim Burton gives it that off-kilter feel, that surreal tone that's always in his work. And that clues you in that it's not meant to be 100% factual. It's more like a tribute from one quirky director to another. It makes fun of Ed Wood a bit, but mostly it's celebrating him and leaves you with an uplifting message that visions are worth fighting for, something I never forgot. This is one of those films that encouraged me to make my own movies. Number 10. American Movie. Pretty much everything I said about Ed Wood is the same here. It's about making movies. Except this time, it's a real documentary. It follows Mark Borchardt and his buddy Mike Shank during the production of an independent film. First of all, it's extremely funny. And for me personally, it's the most quotable movie ever made. I'm constantly reciting quotes from it because of how applicable they are to filmmaking. For example, Mark says, "There's no excuses. Nobody has ever paid admission to face a blank screen that said, 'We weren't able to film this scene, so please forgive us and use your imagination. I've been to the movies hundreds of times, and that's never occurred.'" When I heard that, I laughed my ass off because it's so true. Just never imagined hearing anybody put that into words. American Movie is all about what goes on in a small, low-budget production. It's about a normal guy trying to carry out what he calls the American dream. There's no way I can do this justice. If you haven't seen it, then do so. Number 9. Gremlins. It was a clever little idea. It starts out like a family film, but then it takes a hard turn into horror land. It takes a regular B-movie plot. A normal town gets invaded by monsters. There's only one person who knows about it. He tries to warn the authorities, but they don't believe him. And then a mass attack takes place involving a huge rampage through the town. It has all the shock cliches, like something jumping out from the background or from the foreground, but it's a comedy. Even though the Gremlins are terrible little bastards, they have a fun-loving personality. They just want to have a party and go nuts at the cost of humanity. This is a movie where you cheer for the monsters. And that's not to say you don't care for the human characters, too. Billy and his pet Gizmo make great protagonists. But it's also a Christmas film. It sparkles in that frosty Christmas glow, but with slime and bloodshed. It's truly unique, never duplicated. Number 8. Ghostbusters. This is a true example of lightning caught in a jar, something that only worked once. Think about how zany the plot is. It's about expelled parapsychologist students who start a business catching ghosts and defend the city from a building that attracts spiritual turbulence and an ancient Sumerian god who's trying to end the world but needs a mortal person to choose how the world ends but can't appear until first a gatekeeper and keymaster get together, who are beings that take possession of two humans who are dogs, by the way. Under any other circumstances, this would have been a complete mess. So what made it work so damn good? I don't know. People have been trying to figure that out for years. One thing for certain is it's not an action movie. It's not about the special effects, even though the special effects are great. It's about the characters and the writing. It blends horror and comedy together perfectly. Take, for example, when Venkman sees Slimer. It's a terrifying moment. Slimer comes flying toward him with mouth gaping open. Ray comes running to help. The music builds up. And when he gets there, all that happened was he got covered in slime. Like it was just an inconvenience. He slimed me. And now, after all these years, I understand Bill Murray's sarcastic humor. It was funny as a kid, but as an adult, it's even funnier. Number 7. Terminator 2, Judgment Day. It's one of the first R-rated movies I ever saw. The action and special effects were superb with its groundbreaking CG liquid metal Terminator. CG blew my mind. And once again, this was back when the movie industry knew when to use it, rather than using it for everything. But beyond the visuals, at its heart is a powerful story about the fate of humanity. Every character goes through their own personal change, including Sarah, John, and the Terminator, who learns why you can't kill people. I think it's understandable that many people prefer the first movie with its dark prophecy of a storm coming, but I like how this one has a more positive outlook, that if a machine can learn the value of human life, maybe so can we. Number 6. The Star Wars Trilogy, Episodes 4, 5, and 6. I like them all equally enough. I always considered them one whole movie told in 3 chapters, and arguably we never needed any more. This right here wrapped up the whole story of Luke learning of his father and coming to terms with him. The end of Return of the Jedi makes me real emotional. It's hard for me to believe anyone doesn't like that movie. If I had to pick one, I'd say Empire Strikes Back is my favorite, but you can't have that without the others. Like many people, I feel attached to these films because I saw them at a young age, but I appreciated the stories more as I grew up. It's a retelling of every classic story ever told and combines them in a way that hadn't been done before. These films get passed down every generation and they never get old. Every once in a while I think, hey, is Star Wars ever going to die out? But no, it isn't. And that's good. Number 5. Rocky. First of all, I love that it takes place in Philadelphia, a city which seems to fit the character of Rocky. It's such a simple underdog story. It's just about a small-time boxer who gets a rare chance to fight the champ. But again, it's about the characters. Rocky, Adrian, Paulie, Mickey, Apollo. Geez, what a great assortment of personalities. Rocky's unsophisticated, he's tough, but he has a good heart. Adrian is the perfect complement to him. She brings out his good nature. As she warms up to Rocky, so do we as an audience. The ice rink scene especially is when the movie starts getting good, and from there, you're hooked. I think one of the things that helps make you sympathetic to Rocky and Adrian is how much abuse they take from the other characters. They're always being yelled at by Mickey or Paulie. You know, the film builds up to the boxing match, and by then you're rooting for Rocky to win. But as it turns out, it's not really about winning. It's about just doing your best and making it as far as you can go. Number 4. Back to the Future. It's a comedy, a science fiction, an action movie, and a high school movie. It has everything in it. It's a solid trilogy with a story arc that completes itself over the course of 3 movies, but the first one can stand on its own. Aside from the cliffhanger, all the problems get resolved, and there sure are a lot of them. Marty has to get his parents together, get back to his own time period, and save Doc from getting killed. Considering that it's a fairly complicated plot with alternate timelines, it's still easy to follow and extremely entertaining. It's mainstream and commercially successful, but you can also nerd out and discuss the timeline and all the little details that you only notice with repeat viewings. Above all, the characters are outstanding. In any other film, people like Doc, Biff, and George might be too exaggerated, but here it all clicks together perfectly. Number 3. The Wizard of Oz. Even though it was made in the 30s, it's timeless. The laws of time have no effect on it. You can't tell when it was made. I've heard lots of people say they thought it was from the 50s. It's such a classic story. Farm girl Dorothy wants to get away from her mundane, sepia-toned life. She's transported to the technicolor fantasy world of Oz, and then wants to go back home because there's no place like it. You're with Dorothy the whole journey. You feel magic and wonder and fear, and then you come back to the real world satisfied. Each of the characters Dorothy meets represents some kind of virtue, knowledge, compassion, and courage, and the Wicked Witch is a symbol of all our childhood fears. It's such a rich story, but aside from that, I just like looking at it. The painted backgrounds and the Emerald City sitting at the end of that yellow brick road is an image I'll never forget. Number 2. King Kong. I can't believe I'm talking about King Kong again, but here it is, my second favorite film of all time. As far as the filmmaking craft is concerned, this was the most inspirational to me. This is the movie that first sparked my interest to actually go make them, just like Peter Jackson and so many others. So if you consider it in that regard, it would be number 1. It changed my life just as it changed the world of cinema during the Great Depression. It revolutionized special effects and sound design. They invented all these new techniques and proved that film is a medium made for fantasy and imagination to show you things that you couldn't experience on a stage or on radio. This had to be the biggest breakthrough ever in film. Still to this day, every time I watch it, I always notice something else. Like when Kong is attacking the train, if you look closely, you can see little stop-motion people climbing out of the train. It's crazy the amount of detail and the amount of work that went into it. And my number 1 favorite film of all time. It's a mad, 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 mad world. The only thing I don't like about it's the title, too many mads. But anyway, It's real hard for me to sum this up. I have to keep reminding myself I'm not reviewing 50 films, I'm listing them, or else this would have taken a year. Mad Mad World is a comedy, an action movie, and a treasure hunt all in one. A criminal crashes his car over a cliff, a bunch of strangers stop to help, but in the man's dying final words tells them of a stash of money he hid under a big W. So all these strangers decide they're going after the money, but they can't agree how they're going to split it up, so it becomes a race. They travel by land, by air, by water, and everything that could possibly go wrong goes wrong. The California scenery is beautifully shot on 70mm super wide film, and the whole movie happens in real time. So when they travel from Palm Springs to the Portuguese Bend, it feels like you spent all that time and traveled with them. Of course, that makes for a long movie, but so much happens along the way that it never gets boring. It's an all-star cast: Spencer Tracy, Mickey Rooney, Buddy Hackett, Jonathan Winters, Ethel Merman, Sid Caesar, Milton Berle, and so many more. It's a large cast, and all of them are first-rate. There's certain shots where all of them are nicely positioned into the same wide frame. There's characters you root for, characters you love to hate, characters you want to see get even, and then there's a bunch of cameos like Jerry Lewis, the Three Stooges, and even Buster Keaton. The stunt work is spectacular. There's lots of car smashes and destruction. And in my favorite scene ever, a fight breaks out in an auto service shop. Everything gets wrecked. The damage keeps adding up until the entire place is leveled to the ground. It's like a live-action cartoon. All the madness seems to flow to a musical rhythm. It's like a symphony of destruction. There's no way I can properly review this movie without talking about every scene, so I don't know, maybe another time. It's one hilarious moment after another. It's full of memorable quotes like "push the button marked booze" and "that's the way you want it, that's the way you're gonna get it." There's a few different cuts of the movie, some which are over 3 hours long. I think that's a bit much. I recommend the 2-hour, 40-minute version. This was the one that was most commonly shown in theaters. It still retains that real-time feel, but makes a lot of wise cuts. So what do I love about the film, other than the fact that it's so well made? Well, it's the story. It's about common, ordinary, working people who aren't happy with their lives. They see a goal in sight, that unreachable fantasy, the big W, a symbol of all our dreams. They could all work together and achieve it, but they're overcome by their own greed. It's a movie that celebrates the comedy of life itself and how the world is truly a mad place. It's hard to pinpoint exactly why something is your favorite. It's as if you don't really pick your favorites pick you.